And I swear to you, I remember thinking when I was there, I knew I was there because I was dead and I was happy to be there and I wanted to stay there. It was perfect peace. Hi, I'm Julie Papievis, and I'm on Your Superior Self. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Julie, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's cold and frigid where you're at,
Yes,
so
yes,
there's no other place I'm sure that you would rather be than sitting, here in this chair talking to me on this show and helping
absolutely.
other people in this world feel great about life, about experience.
Certainly
So
going to try.
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and get started. I saw you on my buddy's podcast, Alex Ferrari,
Yes, yes, it was
and
wonderful. Yeah,
I was like,
terrific.
man, her story is so amazing. I had to have you on. So
No,
I
thank
reached
you.
out to you, and I did notice on your website that your death date is my birth date.
Yes, yes.
I was like, wow.
When you
All
told
right.
me,
I was like, all
right,
right, that's a sign, right? That
right,
can't
we
be
have to do
coincidence.
this for sure.
It's got to happen.
Hmm.
So let's fill everyone, let's fill them in on what why May 10th is so significant.
Okay, well, May 10th, 1993, I was leaving a shopping center after I had just returned from a vacation to Cancun, and I had some sunburn, and I went to the shopping mall to buy some moisturizer, and I was leaving the shopping mall and making a left-hand turn onto the street. It was 35 miles an hour, two lanes going each way, and there was a young man who recently got his license who was speeding, going over 50 miles an hour, they said, and he ran the red light and he hit me right in my driver's door, like right in the latch of my driver's door. And I was in a little sports car and he was in a bigger, older car. And the force of his car hitting mine at 50 miles an hour twisted my head on the brainstem and lacerated and severed most of it. Um, but there was an off-duty paramedic who was at the scene who saw and heard the crash. And so he came running over and he had his radio with him because he was getting work done on the paramedic wagon. And he called to the fire station that was just a half block down the street to tell them to bring the jaws of life so they could get me out of the car more quickly to save time. And when he got to the car, he said my head was so far down into my chest that either I had broken my neck or severed my brain stem or both. But either way, I wasn't getting any air. And since he was trained, he broke the back window and got behind me and lifted my head to start an airway. And when he did that, both of my pupils were dilated, so he knew it was not good and like lights out. And in that time, the paramedic wagon got there, so they were like 3 minutes. They were full on me, and the jaws of life took the car door off. And when you go to a doctor's office, they do the vital signs, same thing at a crash scene, and they couldn't get any blood pressure reading. And so they knew it was very serious. And they did what they call a scoop. They knew there was nothing medically they could do at the scene.
Mhm.
So they did what they call a scoop and run, where the jaws of life then takes the car seat out and they scoop you into an ambulance and run you to the hospital. And on the Eisenhower Expressway on the way to Loyola University Hospital, my body completed the dying process where um, you go into, I guess they call it agonal breathing or your last breaths, where you're like gasping for air. And I guess I was doing that. And then you lose control of all your bodily functions and just kind of, lose control and you kind of pee
Oh,
poo everywhere.
how old were you at this time?
I was 29 at
You're
that time.
29.
Hmm.
Do you remember any of the accident?
No, I do not. And my neurosurgeon told me that you remember in sleep wake cycles. So the last thing I remember is I went to Cancun with a friend of mine, a girlfriend, and we were both working a lot. And she said, let's just take we need some time off and to take a quick trip. We went down there, and I came home on Sunday. Her husband picked us up from the airport, and my brother drove me back home because it was Mother's Day. And so I spent some time with my family and my mom, and my brother drove me home. We were talking about my trip, and that's the last memory I have until I woke up from the coma 6 weeks later.
Wow, that is just fascinating on
You think
Mother's
about
Day,
six
right?
weeks, that's Thanksgiving to New Year's Day. I'm like, I never thought of it that way, but when I speak to the schools for the Think First program, one of the kids said that. I'm like, that's a long time. That's like Thanksgiving to New Year's Day. And I'm like, that's right. And for all of my friends and family to not have really any hope because my injury was brainstem, that I would wake up and that I would remain in a vegetative state until it finally took my life. Um, they never actually realized that it already had taken my life and I had spent time in heaven. But people with the brainstem injuries like mine, 96% of them die within the first 24 hours. And the 4% of people who live like semi-vegetatively, like I was in the hospital for a short period of time.
Hmm. Wow. So 4% of people, like only that's the survival rate, like 4%. Like
In
that's
semi-vegetative state for not an extended period of time.
hmm,
But this recovery, I mean, my doctors, everybody in the medical profession calls it a miracle. And anyone who meets me and knows anything, I have an accounting degree. I was an accountant for Price Waterhouse, McDonald's Corporation, and then I was an account executive for Estee Lauder. And that's when I had my crash, and so I knew nothing about a brain stem. I did not know your brain had one, that it was the top of your spinal cord. No idea what that meant. And that, when they listen for a heartbeat in a mother's womb when she's pregnant, the fetus has a heartbeat because one of the first things that's developed that gives us life is a brainstem.
hmm.
And so when that's lacerated and there's not those messages getting from your brain to tell your body how to live, that's why mine instantly began dying because there's nothing telling it to live.
Wow. That's so crazy. Yeah, I'm just now learning. Like one of the classes I'm taking is learning and development, and we're
Mhm.
learning. We're just it's like week 2, and we're learning all of this stuff now. You know, the
So interesting.
it is so interesting, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but going back to your story, like, so what's your first memory, right? Like, is it in heaven or is it when you wake up?
When I woke up, my first memory was of heaven. And they said, my neurosurgeon, that the suicide rate for my injury is 85%. Because when you think about it, and when people are in such a bad state physically and their minds are fully functioning from it being, a brainstem injury, the top of your spinal cord, your life center, um, you can imagine why anyone would not want to live like that. And I can completely testify to that. Is it was terrible when I woke up and I couldn't even speak. It was awful. Couldn't see, just awful. And I,
So
I
just
can
can
imagine why somebody was like that. And if I didn't have the first memory was heaven, if I didn't have that memory, it would have been very hard to to
push
work
through.
through all that. Hmm.
Hmm. So when you had the accident and when I guess you clinically died in the hospital, right?
Well, I'm sure that I probably died on the way too, because my neurosurgeon did an EEG test on my brain, and it was a trauma one, so he was there right there to administer it because they had called ahead, and he said that I did not have enough brain function to keep me alive when I arrived at Loyola Hospital.
Okay.
So in a lot of
Ah,
states, they would have declared me dead. But in Illinois, we have a law that your next of kin has got to be contacted before you can be legally declared
so
dead.
there's a bunch of red tape before you say
Yep.
you're clinically dead. At what point did you end up like when you realized that you were in heaven? Like when did you have an out of body experience? Did you feel
No,
that you had
I
any of
just
that?
showed up. I was just there.
You showed up at the front door,
I, I
the
was
front
like,
gates.
I was just in this large area where there were no floors or ceilings or walls, except there was this very narrow aisleway to my left-hand side. And I swear to you, I remember thinking when I was there, I knew I was there because I was dead and I was happy to be there and I wanted to stay there. It was perfect peace. Lovely. It was perfect peace. And the only outway, it was this outway to the left, my left hand side. And it was very narrow. And I remember thinking, when I get down that aisleway, I'm going to ask God why He made that aisleway so narrow, and how when a lot of people die in a natural disaster, like the terrible things, earthquakes that have happened now, just recently in Turkey. I mean, how do those people fit through that? I remember thinking that when I was there, and that's where the brightest light was for me, and the floor coming up the walls of that aisleway, and that's where I was really drawn to go. And then the next thing I knew, I was before my two deceased grandmothers who looked like my grandmas, not like before they passed away when they were sick, but my grandma's happy and healthy, but they were older women. And I said, okay, come on, girls, let's go. Like pointing to the alleyway, like we
Mm.
were all going to go together. And they said, no, you can't go with us. You have to go back. And I said, well, I can't go back because I'm not physically okay. And I was pointing to my left side that was paralyzed. And my grandmother said, we all had blue eyes, and her eyes were these intense tunnels of blue light. And I couldn't take my eyes off her eyes. And she said, your body will heal. And then she said, go back and be happy. And it's not like she said those words to me. It was like I could feel God's presence in her eyes. And when she said, go back and be happy, I felt the warmth of, felt like a blanket around me. It was the Holy Spirit. And I believe. And I felt like everything was going to be okay. And I didn't know what okay meant, that it meant the recovery that I've had, but I knew that I was protected and I was being cared for, and like we all are. And so that is the memory that I had when I woke up. And like I said, and I couldn't really see. I mean, I was paralyzed completely on my left side, head to toe, and my left pupil is still dilated, but I only could see shadows. And that was after my left eyelid finally opened. And I mean, there's still things internally that I need to take digestive enzymes to help me digest food and things like that. Um, 10 years ago, I did a indoor triathlon and I finished in the middle of my age group. I've always been an athlete, so your spinal cord has a good memory. And I call therapists occupational physical God's little elves because they teach you how to functionally have your body that really doesn't work the same, how to, adjust it and
Mhm.
so to make it functional. And when we all got shut down with COVID and I had to really stay home a lot, um, my body, my atrophy came back, and I had to go back into physical therapy for months so that they could loosen up the atrophy on my left side again so that I could dress myself. It really, so I never really get far from it. Um, but I feel so grateful that, there was a test done about 8 months after my injury back at the hospital. And it was a enclosed MRI where they, have the cage around your head. And, you can hear for anybody who's had those indoor, the enclosed MRIs,
Mhm.
um, you can hear the people who are operating it giving you instructions. And they said, oh, her brainstem is normal. And I'm like, I can hear you guys. Like, I mean, oh my gosh. And that I read the result to my neurosurgeon, and he had a bunch of his students in the room, and they were all saying what a miracle it was because this doesn't happen.
You're a miracle. You are a miracle.
I mean, you know what? It's hard. So when people say that to me, when they first started saying that, excuse me, to me, um, I wasn't sure how to respond. I'm still really not sure how to respond because how do you be that? A
Mhm.
miracle. What am I supposed to be like? I'm still so ordinary. I'm just a very ordinary person. And I feel like I've been given this great story to tell people to share hope. And so I do. And I'm so thankful to people like you who give me the opportunity to do it because um, I feel like it's my purpose for sure.
Mhm. There's so much I want to say.
Go
I
ahead.
think I think we take this life for granted, and that I
We
think
should.
we're all miracles, right? Like I feel like just
Hmm.
the fact that we're breathing right now, um, and that I have this conscious awareness, and I'm speaking to you, like I am something, right? I am a conscious being having a conversation and receiving information and data to and from you, right? And
Right.
people are going to listen to this, and like we just take it for granted. Like
Right.
I am here.
Absolutely.
Like I am something. I am a being, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm not a void, right? Like I am I am in a human body having an experience, and we're living on planet Earth, and it's, you know, it is rotating around the sun, and it's like the idea that we're here and like have evolved as conscious beings is just, that's a miracle in itself.
Right.
You know, like, and you had this experience of having this hellacious car accident, going through, you know, having being in a coma, and only having like a 4% chance of surviving that. But you went and had an experience with God in heaven to come back and spread that message, right?
Right.
I mean, that is above average miracle. Like, you know what I mean? That's above average story. But like to be able to share that with you, and then like with everyone else that needs to hear this, right? Like that's a miracle, right? Like that's a miracle in itself. And so like I hear you, and I take things for granted too. Like I was just sick for like a week, just getting over a stomach bug, and I don't realize how much I take for granted in my body when it's healthy, right? Like
Well,
I don't
even when I
think,
get a stomach bug now, I mean, I feel like, everyone, when they feel their worst, it is their worst.
yeah.
And,
But that's the
I
thing. That's the measuring stick, right? Like
right,
that. Like when you
right,
feel great, you don't think about when you feel bad. So like you just
right.
take that for granted. And then when you feel bad, you're like, oh my God, like my
This
body,
is
like
the
what is
worst day
going?
ever.
Yeah. Like I can only imagine like what you felt like when you were going through your therapy. I'm sure you still have trauma in your body. Like the body remembers everything. Like there's still
Right,
trauma from that day.
right.
Like, like I can only imagine like what you felt like when
The
you
hardest
weren't your
work I've ever
best.
done. The hardest work I've ever done. It really was. I mean, it's like, you know what? It's like if somebody slaps you up against a wall and then you try to like pull your arm off and they slap it back down against the wall. That's what it feels like when your body is paralyzed and it can't do the things it normally wants to do. Everything literally was such an effort. Although, they said, the stress and everything, and they did put me on an antidepressant for a while because, like, I mean, I was just telling my boyfriend, I said, it was a cry like when an animal has been really hurt, and it was that kind of primal crying. I don't know where it came from, and it's like I didn't know how to stop it, and it was something that I didn't recognize. But they put you on an antidepressant because they say you have to participate in therapy, otherwise you're going to go in a nursing home and just lay there. And so I was like, nope, nope, that's not going to happen. And so, they did that, and I started the therapy, and I was able to go off the antidepressants right away, thankfully. And I'm just kind of a half full person. And so as soon as I was able to get to work, I felt so much better. But they did, biofeedback and things like that. And I would fall asleep within like 5 minutes, and they were like, okay, you're very chill about this whole thing. And I'm like, I feel God's got this. He's
God's
got this.
got this. Well, how did you know you were in heaven?
I just knew. I knew I was there because I was dead. I knew it.
So when you were dead, did you know, did you have a this knowing that you were still Julie? Like you did you still have that
Mhm.
consciousness, that awareness of like I'm still me, I still have my personality?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, I think when you hear all the different stories about heaven, that's why he sent my grandmothers to me in the shape of himself, in the shape of my grandmothers, because I was close to them. I would listen to them. Like I was training for a biathlon actually when I got into my injury. And so I would, one of my morning jogs on Sunday was to my grandma's house. And so I'd spend time with her. And so it just was very natural to me that they came to, deliver God's message. And, you know,
Go back and be happy.
and I think, yes, and I think when God says happy, he doesn't mean like, you know, you're going to be rich, you're going to have the best job, you're going to have the best car, whatever those things are actually. But happiness is just, I really believe, comes from within. It comes from so many things in your life. And what brings you, everybody individually knows what brings happiness. And I think that our faith in God, whatever we call God, whoever we worship, that's happiness. And I think that's what he said when he said, go back and be happy. That's what
Hmm.
he wants.
How long do you think you were in heaven?
I get asked it a lot, and I don't know. I honestly
Hmm.
don't know, because I just assume that I I didn't have a real blood pressure reading even when they got to me. So I kind of think that instantly that I probably died. Um
Sure.
and was brain dead when I arrived at the hospital. And like I said, in a lot of states, it could have legally declared me dead then. And so I think it was pretty instantaneous.
Sure. And then, so you showed up. You describe it like, um, it felt real to you, right? Like the tunnel or the small path, or how would you describe that?
The aisleway that
Yeah,
had
the
the bright
aisleway.
light on the floor, that's where I was drawn to go there, because
Did it
that's
have
where
like features? Did it have colors?
that was the brightest light on the floor coming up the walls, and
Hmm.
such warmth. And that's where it was so inviting, and that's where I really wanted to go. I was drawn to go down there.
Was it like a remembering almost? Like,
No,
no?
it was just like when you see something in front of you that you want, like as a child, and you go towards it. That's what it was. Oh yeah, I
What
want that. I'm gonna
what
go there.
about music? Any music at all?
No,
No.
no. And I'm such a musical person. I love music. I love music.
I
And
I hear a lot about music, like when people talk about their near deaths, they say they
mhm.
hear like different types of sounds they can't even describe. Like there's
Right,
no
I've heard that
words.
before. Yes. And yeah, and I'm a person who, it's funny because when I worked out, it's, I don't know, I listen to all different kinds of music. But my brother actually had put one of the tapes I was training for with the biathlon, and I had everything from like 70s disco to Metallica. I mean, I listened to it all. I mean, I carry the
I heard Metallica, I'd be like,
I,
I don't know if I'm in heaven.
it was yeah, I
Like,
love all
uh-oh. If I hear
music.
Sandman, uh-oh. So you see your grandmothers, they tell you to go back and be happy. Is that it? Like, is that the to the extent of it? I mean, that's obviously a very powerful message and a very powerful experience. Was there anything else in there?
Well,
Like,
before that, they told me that my body would heal. And that's when I felt it was like the Holy Spirit, that I was wrapped, like it felt like a big warm blanket being wrapped around me, and that you're totally wrapped in comfort and protection.
hmm,
And and before that, when my grandmother said, you can't go with us, you have to go back, I got a little tense, because I said, I can't go back, I'm not physically okay. So how did I know that my left side was hurt or paralyzed? How did I know that there? But I did. And when she told me that, or when God told me that my body would heal, that's why I said, I'm sure my grandmother would love to believe it was her idea. um, but I feel like when I was told that, I just felt like it was truth, that everything was going to be okay. And then to go back and be happy was then to me his message of really go back and have faith.
hmm,
And I thought, how could I not share that? I mean, first of all, I'm a talkative person anyway. I love people. I've always loved people, all people. I like people. I just,
sure. I'm glad you do, right? Like I'm glad somebody does because it just seems like nowadays people are they're doing everything in their power to get away from people.
Yeah, and I,
Um,
I don't understand that. I really don't, and I don't think it's good for anyone. And one of the first things that my neurosurgeon told me to do um, was to. It's a program that the College of Neurosurgeons came up with, and it's called Think First. It's an injury prevention program. It's not for profit, and I speak to schools all the time, middle schools and high schools mainly, about a nurse gives the first part of the presentation and gives a lot of statistics from the CDC and things and how often these kinds of injuries happen. And now with the whole added thing with fentanyl, that we have to really make these kids aware of what's going on. And then they have someone like myself who has been injured to come in and talk about injury prevention and how they really need to reach out. And I talked to them about, I never really had a comparison to actually offer them until the whole thing happened with COVID and the schools were shut down and how hard that hit all of them, that big difference in their life all of a sudden. And so I talk about, how would they like to live like that? Or I talk about the young man who hit me and I called him and I told him I forgave him because I prayed about it. For me, that was important. And I called him and told him I forgave him. And I actually heard that he had not gotten his life together. And he said to me, I feel like I got away with murder. And I feel terrible. And I say to the kids, how would you like to have to live with that? Not only being the one who's injured, but also having to live with doing that to someone. And I'm like, none of you kids would want to do that to anyone. And they're like, no, no. And I feel like in the job that I'm working in now, I have an accounting degree, like I told you, and I'm working, we're at a Fairhaven or, a wealth management firm. And I feel like, people say that about, wealth management, that they feel like it's for only wealthy people. And I say, no, it's for everyone who really is planning for the future. And I think all of us should plan for the future. I think because none of us know when something's going to happen to us, right? I mean,
mhm.
and in most all of our lives, something does happen to us, and we do need to have preparation for that, both financially, and medically, and we have to have preparation for that. And so I feel like I get to help people, and legally too, with those aspects, all those aspects that we get to help people, and we get to do that. Now I get to do that for work. So I think it's really wonderful that I can, speak, and I speak at different schools and libraries and all different community organizations, but then I get to work where I do, and we get to help people in that way also at Fairhaven. And so, yeah, I
Sure.
feel like I'm in a whole new line of work, but I think it's really useful.
I can just say, trust me, you need to get this because you just don't know what's going to happen. Like I'm living proof of this, right? Like
Right.
my life story, read my book. Like
Oh yeah, and
that's
that's why
case in point.
we did the book because not that I ever wanted to do a book, and nor did the neurosurgeon. We really just wanted to go on with our lives. And there were the Dr. Oz show, 700 Club show, they're all on my website, and or some of them are. And they said, you really need a book. You need a takeaway. I was getting asked to do so many talks, and so that's why we came up with the book, Go Back and Be Happy, named after what my grandmother told me in heaven. And that's what my website is, gobackandbehappy.com. And we did all that because that's what she told me in heaven. And people kept telling me, you've got to put this out there for people. And so, and I'm so happy to do these podcasts for the same reason too. And so it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
keeps
Yeah.
brought out there more and more.
Yeah, definitely. I think spreading that knowledge that we are more than these physical bodies is an important message.
Hmm. I
Do
agree.
you, do you feel that connection with God still?
Oh yeah. I feel like like Trey, I obviously, we communicate through emails, and I don't know you, but I feel like after personally talking to you before a little bit, and now um that we're talking really face to face, and um I feel like I know you a little more, and you've told me a little bit about your lovely family. And so I think that's how I felt about God after leaving heaven. I feel like I have a more personal relationship with him.
Mm,
That, I remember praying when we were little kids, and my dad would be like, just give it up to him. And we're like, we do, and nothing happens. And so, and of course he was listening the whole time. And so now I feel like I just have a more personal relationship.
sure. Do you how do you cultivate that though, right? Like for someone who's never had a near death and they're saying the same things you did when you were a small child. Like I pray, I look up in the skies and I ask God for a sign or some type of communication where let me know you're there, right? But nothing comes. What do you say to those people?
It's there, it's coming, it is there. We just have to pray then to be able to see what he's giving us, because he's never going to give you exactly what you want, how you want it. And I have found that out the hard way too. I mean, it's been my frustration, and I've become impatient with things too, just like everybody else, but he does work everything out for our good, for sure. And
Yeah.
all of
Mm.
us get impatient, and all of us look for something that exactly that we're asking for, but ultimately he does give you what you're asking for. He will.
Have you had any more experiences in heaven since that
No, I have
no?
not. And I've been kind of mad about that. I'm like, you give me that. I've
I've
got
been kind of
nothing.
mad about that.
And I've got nothing else. And I'm like, that's it. But I get to say, unfortunately, we lost my dad too soon to cancer about 4 years ago. And um I was very close to him. He had a lot to do with my recovery. We were very close always, but then certainly with my recovery. Um, and I feel like he for sure is my guardian angel. Some wonderful things have happened in my life since he has passed. And I know that he is my
Does he
guardian
give you
angel.
signs at all?
No, I just feel like certain things are falling into place that he would have wished for me to have
Hmm.
fallen in place beforehand. So yeah, I've really met a very nice person, a nice man in my life, and so I know that that was a wish of his, and I feel so happy with the work that I'm doing, able to help other people and getting out, being able to share my story more, um, which is what I've always wanted to do, is to share it. That was the first thing I told my doctors that I wanted to do, is that I would promise to share the story with as many people as I could.
Hmm.
And so just enabling all those things to be possible for me. And for me, doing the triathlon 10 years ago, um, my neurosurgeon, Dr. Shea, would not, who has since passed away of Parkinson's, unfortunately, and my dad called him my medical dad. We were very close, and he had so much to do with his I actually used to run like 5K races with his wife, and he told both of us to stop running so much. It's so hard on your bodies. And so then I went back to swimming, and I grew up with a pool in my backyard. And like I said, your spinal cord has a good memory. And so I, interestingly, I can't do freestyle, but
Hmm.
I can do backstroke.
That's odd.
Isn't that? And I can do side stroke. I can't do butterfly because I don't have that
Freestyle was my
rotation in my arm.
freestyle was my jam back in the day.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
swimming. I love swimming.
I
I
do
love
too.
swimming.
Yep.
I do a lot of running now too. So like I feel like that I need to run, right? Like that's my
That's how
meditation.
I felt. Yes.
Yeah,
And
that
then
scares me a little bit. Like I don't know what's gonna happen if that ever goes away,
swim.
right? Yeah, swim.
Well, and to me, the transition, oh, I was so upset when he said I had to make that transition, but I put on fins, so I go faster, and so I feel like
Like a
in my
mermaid, huh?
head, it feels like running to me.
Mm,
I
I
feel
can
like
see
I
that.
go much faster, and
I
I
can see
get
that.
to use my legs more powerfully, and yeah,
Sure, I can see that for
I
sure.
love it. And yeah,
Did
that's my time to think.
oh man. So when you do that, right? Like have you like when you're in those deep flow states, have you connected like again with like your grandparents or your grandmother?
That's when I talk to my dad.
Yeah.
That's when I talk to my dad.
Do you ever get confirmation that you're communicating with them?
Mm, I just really, like I said, I feel like the things happening in my life are things that we had talked about and that he had wished for me, and things
Sure.
are really coming together and nicely.
I always see like signs, like little signs that are significant for me, like a
Mm.
cardinal or something like
Oh, yes.
uh,
I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me of that. Um, and so many people say that. And we actually just had a dinner for my dad's for the anniversary of his passing. And my mom gave each of us a cardinal at dinner.
hmm, that's
And
awesome.
because my parents have a lovely screened-in porch in the back of their house, and my mom often sees a cardinal. And a lot of times when we're back there as a family, we see a cardinal. We're like, "Hi, Dad! You could not be here with us. We're so happy you're here." And yeah,
That's fascinating.
hmm
I love this. I love this kind of story. I wonder how that started. Like, I really wonder how. Like,
yeah, I didn't.
it's so common that you hear people say that
Right.
cardinals are our past loved ones. I mean,
hmm
you're not the first person. Like, I've heard that my entire life, but I just wonder
Me
where that
too.
starts.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
either.
yeah, yeah,
But it does happen, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's something that we experience. So yeah,
It's been a major sign for me in my life, just for like to your
yeah.
point of like major choices,
Mhm.
or like when you're asking for help or guidance, like something like if a cardinal pops, because it's like I don't see a cardinal every day, you know,
No,
like it only
no.
shows up when I need it, and that's the funny part is like that's when it shows up,
Right, right.
you
And
know.
especially this time of year, very seldom, but the cardinal does show up. Oh, I forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me.
Sure. Any I've heard a lot of people, not a lot of people. I've talked to a handful of near death experiencers, and they say they come back with like um special gifts or abilities. Have you had any of those, like any type of psychic abilities and enhancements or gifts at all?
I think for me, it's really like a knowing.
Mm,
It's just
intuition.
yes. Like it's not like I'm clairvoyant by any stretch, nothing like that, but there's just a definite knowing about things. And not that there's perfection in things. I mean, I still live in this world. I mean, there's things that happen that are not perfect, certainly, but there's just a knowing about something when something is right. Or I will ask, I really wonder, what I should be doing or if this is the direction I should be going. And I feel like I always get an answer either through events or just through a knowing that I
Hmm,
did not have previously.
hmm. I've heard a lot of different like philosophies about like this world that we live in recently, right? Like I watched The Matrix, rewatched that, and
Mm,
started. I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that?
long
The
time ago.
Matrix, a long time
Mm.
ago, right? Like there's a lot of theories that we're living in a simulation, The Matrix. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Um, that's that's a big question because I feel like I just take every day as it comes. I feel like this place that we are living now is really just like a moment in time. And I feel like heaven is our home. And I just feel like I know that, that's really not an answer, but I just feel like this is just something that's like it's a blip,
It's
a
temporary,
radar.
right?
It's a blip on a radar screen.
It's a
I
dream.
Yeah, kind of. Really. I mean, it's not, I feel like that's the place where I came from, and that's the place I'll go back to. And this is just a momentary place in time.
Hmm,
But I also truly believe that what we do with in this place in this time matters. It matters. And I think this place is where we're going to have our biggest trials. And this is where the biggest imperfections are going to be. And this is really where the hardest work is. And I
yeah,
believe that our joys are, for me, I mean, there was nothing, the perfect peace for me that was in heaven is nothing at all that I've ever experienced here, not even on my best day. It's not a feeling ever that I've had here. And so when you're asking me to call it something, I really can't in terms of calling Earth, this life, this place, something. I don't believe that this is forever for me. Mm,
I agree. I agree with that statement. I think this is just from what other people have mentioned, right? Your
mm,
experience reading your or talking to you about your experience and then reading some about some others. It seems like this is not the final destination whatsoever. This is
no,
what people have called a school. I don't
yes,
know if that's accurate, right? Like the one thing I will say is this, right? And like I've heard both sides of the stories. I've heard of people having these experiences and coming back and saying that this is classroom, a school. But then it's like I've heard the other side of the argument too. It's like, well, if it's a classroom in a school, why don't we remember anything, right? Like when you're in school and you're going K through 12, like you remember what you did last year, right? Like so that way you can add on to what you've already done.
right. You keep learning,
Yeah, you keep learning.
then you get smarter.
It's like you come in here with a clean slate and you have this life experience and you have your ups and downs and you don't remember if you've had past incarnations. So it's like
But you also have free will.
that is
And
true.
and people have asked me, so are you kind of mad at God because he didn't, save you from having that crash? And I said, no, because that's free will.
Hmm.
And we would not want God intervening in everything, would we? No, of course not. And so, but like I said, I look at the kind of things that I get to do now because of this injury. And there's a happiness in this life that I'm living now that I did not have before. And not that I was unhappy before, I wasn't. Like I said, I've always been a half full person. And my doctors have told me that. And all the brain mapping and everything they did. And they're like, you are never a person who would have committed suicide. You're just not that person. And I'm not. And um, it's unfortunate. I've lost a lot of friends who have had, injuries who not necessarily similar, but catastrophic injuries who could not live with it. And it's very sad. It's either they have died from their injuries or committed suicide. And um, it's so unfortunate and so sad. But I feel like I have this life is so much more fulfilled for me. And
Hmm.
I always thought I wanted children, and I was not able to have children after my injury. And for the longest time, like at least the first 15 years, all I did, my job, my life, was therapies. It took like 8 weeks to be able to point my left foot forward. I mean, it was to that kind of detail, but they literally had to put me back together again physically. And um, so that was my life's work for a long time. And I could not have cared for a child, and I couldn't naturally have a child. And my mom said, look at all this work you're doing with children. Their parents cannot, give them the experience that you've given them. So look at all the great things you're doing for these kids. And I thought, that's right. And it feels good to me. And then I'm able to do all this for other people in different ways, either financially or in talking to them about finances or insurance or, kinds of preparation, or talking to the school about injury prevention, or churches, or just community organization. I mean, just anywhere. And it's a wonderful gift that I've received. And so I wouldn't take it away for anything.
It sounds like you're grateful for the experience because it's
For sure.
you found meaning in the accident, right? Like you
Yes,
found meaning
for
in
sure.
this,
Yeah.
which is fascinating, which is just great. Like Viktor Frankl talks about that in his book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Mm,
People get into these situations where they have like he was a victim of um the concentration camps, right? Like
right.
he lived in four of them, death camps, and he saw the worst of the worst, and
Oh, right, for sure.
he saw how man like stripped down to nothing but his
Soul.
yeah. I mean, that's something you can say. How
Right.
someone can find meaning in that, and
Yes.
and
Right.
instead of asking life like what is the meaning of life, like stepping up and saying what is my meaning to life, right? Like
Exactly.
how am I going to um how am I going to persevere? How am I going to pursue my life's meaning? And I feel like you've done that. Like you've
Well,
gone
thank
through
you.
your life um, through a lot of work and a lot of patience and a lot of healing. You've been able to find meaning in helping others see and find their own meaning in life. So, I mean, that's perfect, right? I mean, that's what it's about.
Well, I feel like, and this is just from what my doctors have told me, and we've done the brain mapping and things like that. He's like, this is just the way that you approach things and approached this experience of your injury and of heaven. Um, he said, this is just, it's who you are. It's in your DNA. It's just who you are. That's why I said I always wanted to be a morning person. I'm not. To do this taping in the evening, I'm like, oh, this is so my time of day. And and I'm like, but I wish I could be like one of those early morning people. And he said, no, he said that's deeply embedded in your DNA. And he said, and that's the same thing in terms of having the kind of drive that you do. He said that it's just something you're born with. And I said, but I died. And he said, but that is deeply built within your DNA. That's not going to change. And I said, interesting.
I'm the exact opposite. Like I'm a morning person. Like I, I do
I'm
this.
so jealous of that.
I, but I'm right. But right now, I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm late
I'm
night.
like,
Like I can barely form a sentence. You're all fired up. Like, yeah. Um,
woo. You're forming sentences just fine.
wow. What do you like? What do you tell people, right? That are, you know, when you have these side conversations with people that come up to you and ask you, like, who are struggling, like people listening to this right now who are struggling to find meaning, like in spirituality and having having conversations with God, having a relationship with God. Like, what is it that you say to them to kind of maybe spark um, curiosity because of
Well,
your experience?
any God wants a relationship with us like anyone else. So a relationship that you have with anyone, how do you begin that? You begin speaking to someone, sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings. That's what he wants us to do with him. Reach out to him, talk to him, talk to him. And you know, we all come from him. We are all his children. So I don't know what anybody's belief system is or what their thought system is, but if you just start there and start talking and believing that he's listening to you and he wants to be your friend and wants to have a relationship with you, whatever that relationship is, but just a relationship. And all of us know what a relationship is because we all have them in our lives. So just begin there. And that's when I think you'll begin to see things happen in your life. Just begin there.
Hmm. I love that. Julie, this has been awesome.
Trey, thank you. This has been awesome. You're great.
Where can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Well, I have a website, go back and be happy.com, and there's a contact me page for that. They can contact me there. I have a Facebook page, go back and be happy Facebook page. There's two of those actually, or no, I'm sorry, one of those two, Julie Papievis, just my name, Papiebis, Facebook pages. So I have three Facebook pages in all. I'm not on Twitter yet, but I'm going to be on Twitter. And I'm on LinkedIn also, under again my name. And so there's many ways to reach out to me through my website and
I feel like you need
pages.
to get a TikTok account. Like I just started a TikTok account. I have no idea how to do it. I have my kids try to, you know, they're trying to teach me. It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they have better. They know how to use those things
They
better than I
love that TikTok, boy. I tell you
do.
what.
I'm gonna try Twitter first and see how I do with that. And yeah, we'll see. And I don't know necessarily that people want to hear from me like in real time, but I do want to hear from people. And my I have a book on Amazon, and Go Back and Be Happy, so people can reach out to me through there also. So there's a a lot of ways to get a hold of me. And I love to hear from people because that's how I know that this message is getting out. And, if anybody ever wants me to do their podcast or speak, or I just, that's my purpose, is to continue to tell the story. So, and I have to say too, this one thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, that at one time, because of the miraculous nature of my recovery, they wanted to do a movie about my story. So I went to Hollywood, and I ended up walking away from that because of, changes that they wanted to make to the story and thing. But they talked to me and said, Julie, this story has so much substance, and you live in the Chicago area, but anywhere, there could be a documentary that could be made from this, because it really is such a wonderful story. So that really is my prayer someday, to have my story made into a documentary. So just more people would have access to it. So if there's anyone who
Hmm.
has any information on that, I would love to hear about that too. So I'd love to be connected
Sure.
with anybody.
I feel like you should have your own podcast too. Like I feel like
Yeah, and I've thought about that, because yes, it's in consideration. I really want to put that together too in the
it's
future.
very easy. It's not hard at all. People think like people come up to me and say, I don't know how you do it, Trey. It's like if I can do it, anybody can do it. Like it's not even that hard. I promise you.
Yeah, no, that is something that definitely is in consideration, because it's gotten such a much larger focus, because of everybody being shut down with COVID. I think that there are many more things out there. So that is something that's in the works too. So stay tuned for that also.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Awesome. Julie, this has been fantastic. I can't thank
Uh,
you enough.
I can't thank you enough, Trey. You've been terrific. So.